So let me ask you a question then, because it sounds like you understand this from both sides of the business. What did you learn from probably one of your business failures that kind of led you to go down this road and say, hey, you know what? I need to create 40 flushes for the next guy.
Well, that's a good question. The things I learned that I failed at were really more of the mindset stuff that business owners deal with. When I first started my business and started building magazines and creating that world, I was ill prepared for how loud my inner voice could be. You know, we all have an inner voice, and pardon the language, but it's a jackass. We all have it that tells us we suck, that tells us we can't do this, that we're never going to be that guy, you're never going to be successful, you're not good at blah, blah, blah. And I wasn't ready for it. In fact, there's a lot of chapters in the 40 Flushes that deal with mindset and learning to control that voice. And I think part of that voice is also the voice that tells you that you're too old to learn. 40 Flushes was really my way of sidestepping that voice, because you may be too old to learn to sit down and read a college textbook, and you're not too old to do that, but you may just be out of practice. It may be a skill set that you haven't developed. But to read some comics and a few short narratives and learn from that, nobody's too old for that. Nobody's too hardened against that kind of stream of information. So I hope that I'm able to sidestep some of that inner voice that tells people they've done it this way for years, it's worked for them, I don't need to learn any new things. And so that comes into play, because I really, as I mentioned, I was not ready. I think I was probably ready for the external ones, dealing with a lot of that aspect, dealing with customers, dealing with everything else. But the internal struggles is where the challenges were. And there's a lot of that in 40 Flushes. It's interesting. We have a tendency to judge what's going on inside our heads against what we see externally from other people. And it's easy to think that I'm the only person sitting here struggling with this voice telling me I suck. And it's very eye-opening to realize that everyone around you has their own version of that voice that's telling them that. You know, I come from a science background. My degree was in physics. Almost. I was one class short of having a physics degree, then decided I didn't want to be a physicist. But it was science. I've always been science-minded. And I used to hear people talk about, affirmations and manifestation and meditation. And all of that stuff seemed like hocus pocus mysticism to me. It just didn't make sense that you could say a few nice things in the mirror, and lo and behold, the world changes its path to make you successful. What I have grown to learn is that all of us are right on the razor's edge of being paralyzed by fear and self-doubt and indecision. And we spend far more hours of our day trying to decide what we're going to do next than we actually spend doing something. And as a result of that, we're very inefficient. We just don't get nearly as much done as we should get done with the hours in our day. An interesting experiment that I do with a lot of people I work with is I'll have them hand their phone to a spouse or a coworker, and this coworker or spouse will just set 10 random alarms over the next week during working hours. So you don't know when they're coming, but you're sitting there working, and then boom, alarm goes off on your phone. And I encourage people to stop and write down what they're doing when that alarm clock goes off, or that alarm goes off on their phone. And then what we find is usually out of the 10 alarms that go off during working hours, usually they will only actually be doing something for like 3 of them. The rest of them, they'll be sitting there thinking about work or worrying about work or trying to decide what they're going to do next or playing on their computer to avoid work. And being aware of all of that extra time that you're wasting worrying about work is not actually work, but it's more exhausting than work.
Isn't that the
And
truth?
it feels like you're doing something. At the end of the day, it's why so many people get home at the end of the day and think, what did I do today that moved my business forward? And they'll realize that they worked their butt off and didn't actually accomplish anything that moved their business forward. And it's because of those kind of things. And so that was my big learning experience, is that everyone is dealing with that. And if you can find ways and tools, affirmations, meditation, whatever it is, that moves you a little bit away from that edge, so you're not spending as much time doing nothing, and instead you're doing something, you'll see your business grow and move so much faster.